Do you remember the first time I met you?
I don't, but I remember the first time I heard your name was in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Because I worked there in 1999 doing Paint Your Wagon with Vicki Garnick at the Jackson Hole Playhouse.
Oh my God.
And I remember that everyone was like, oh yeah, Don Partridge, he went to BYU, he's gay, la la la. And I was like, oh, who is this guy? But I don't remember the first time I met you.
Everybody said I was gay.
People said you were, yeah, people said you were gay.
Yeah, I'm pretty obvious.
Well, it's not that you were obvious, I think you were just out, which is, you know.
No, I wasn't, actually.
You weren't?
No.
Are you sure?
Not until I turned 30. I wasn't officially out.
Really?
Yeah.
When did you turn 30?
Just obvious.
What year was that?
I don't know.
I'm surprised that people would have said you were gay if you weren't. Or maybe,
no, it's...
maybe
well,
people just
knows.
said, oh, you reminded me of Don Alden, and I was like, oh, that means he's gay.
Right,
In my mind, I just attached the two.
You reminded...
Well, I don't know. You know how people do that.
Right,
They're like, you remind me so much of my little cousin. I'm like...
he's gay, too.
I'm like, your cousin's gay. Everyone watch out.
Okay, well, I remember the first time I met you. I was coming out of the HVAC.
Oh, wow.
Onto the lawn on the south side.
Okay, okay.
And, you were with Nathan Balzer.
Oh, I was?
Yeah.
So that must have been in 95.
Yeah, and you were coming out, and I remember I was leaving, and you were just about to start school or something.
Yeah.
And we're like, who's this Clark Johnson? Clark Johnson is the one guy who is out. He's like the one Mormon who's in school, and he's out. And like, everybody knew Clark Johnson, Clark Johnson, Clark Johnson. Clark Johnson's out. Clark Johnson's gay. And he'll tell you so.
Right.
And so everyone's like, he's a Mormon pioneer. You're a gay pioneer.
Well, I mean, it's just so funny because I think so many of the people at BYU were avoiding, like, people like Carlos and Paul. I mean, Carlos and I have talked about this now. That
guilty by association.
Well, yeah, they avoided the hell out of me. They were like, we've got to not hang out with this person because it's too much. I mean, when you're not ready to come out, like the worst thing you can do is hang out with someone really queenie because everyone's just going to be like, oh, you're gay too? I didn't know. And somehow, like, even if you're trying to play it straight, you just look so much gayer next to a gay person. You know what I mean? Right. There's just that sparkle dust that kind of rubs off. So I remember the first time I met Paul. I remember the first time I met Carlos. I think I was just a little like woo up in the air when I probably met you because I don't remember meeting you or
unforgettable.
Because well, it's not that you're forgettable. I don't think I had an attachment with you like if you had been in a class or something that I kind of. Whereas with Carlos, I knew he was MDT. I met him with Tara Starling. I was in Secret Garden that was playing in the Diong. I was just in the ensemble, but Carlos was down there rehearsing something with Tara for I think their MDT seminar class or something. And I remember I saw him, and the first thing he did was he looked at me, and then he like looked away. And but that was more than Paul. Paul didn't even look at me, and I did. It was actually it's weird, the Secret Garden, but I was helping Nicole Riding, who I think you know.
Yeah.
I was helping her with her her seminar project of Secret Garden, and she needed someone to play Colin, you know, the little sick kid who's in bed. And she was like, "You're perfect," you know. And so so I went with her to this rehearsal, and Paul was her partner, and he did not. I mean, he doesn't believe this happened, but he was. I felt like he was so terrified of me that he didn't look me in the eyes once the whole entire like rehearsals, production, all of that stuff. He was just kind of like. But I mean. You know, he definitely warmed up to me, and he started hanging out with me and my friends, to his great credit, because he wasn't out at all, and I think he was really, really afraid of, like, the ramifications, because he was the Young Ambassador's president and all these things. So, I think, you know, to his credit, he did kind of, you know, eventually warm up to me and my friends and hang out with us a little more and stuff. But, it was crazy. Like, I don't know if it was just the universe or what, but being an out gay person at BYU, I instantly made this group of gay friends. I remember the first kind of the first gay person that I met at BYU was this guy who was living in Deseret Towers, and I was living at Heritage Halls, which is Heritage Halls where you have there are 6 roommates in this 3-bedroom apartment, and you have a kitchen. Whereas Deseret Towers, you're in those rooms and you eat at the cafeteria. I'm sure you remember all this. The lingo. But yeah, Yo, you lived off campus the whole time?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. You're so mature.
I know.
So I remember that I met this kid. I was a diver in high school, and so I met this kid who was straight down at the diving pool at the Richards building. And we were just there, and he was there, and he was like, "Oh, you're such a good diver. Will you like teach me kind of how to dive?" And I was like, "Okay." And so I taught him like the approach that you do on the diving board and stuff like that. And I was really obsessed with the movie Clueless at the time, and so I like did a Clueless quote, and he lost it. He's like, "I'm the biggest Alicia Silverstone fan ever. I just love her. She's amazing." And this whole like shrine to her up in my room, and I was like, "Wow, this is a lot." And he was like, "You have to come back to my room and like see this shrine I have to Alicia Silverstone." And I was like, "Okay, that's cool. I'll go with you." And so so I follow him back to Deseret Towers, and like I walk in the door, and his roommate is sitting there, and I'm like, his roommate's gay. Like I just instantly knew his roommate was gay. You know, gaydar. And then I looked at his CD collection, and I was like, his roommate is definitely gay, because he had like all these musicals, and then he had Lea Salonga's like solo album, and nobody has that unless they're gay. And I was like, oh my gosh, I know every song on this album. So so we started talking, and then he was like, "Oh, do you mind if I like walk you back to your apartment or whatever?" And I was like, "No, not at all." The roommate, because I saw the Alicia Silverstone shrine. It was everything it was cracked up to be. It was like all these pictures of her like printed out from the internet, because the internet was just like getting going then, back in 1995, and so he just had all these pictures up. It was really funny. So this guy walks me out, and he's like, "Are you gay?" Like right in the elevator, and I was like, "Yes." And he was like, "Me too." He's like, "I just can't believe I met a gay person at BYU in the first like week of class, And I was like, "This is crazy." So we like became friends, and then the other thing is I came out to my bishop about 3 months before, and my family, about 3 to 6 months before I went to BYU. And my bishop was like, "Well, we really want to send you to BYU still. I just really feel prompted that it will be a good experience for you. So I'm going to go ahead and just, you haven't done anything," because I hadn't done anything sexually serious. Although I did have this like quasi-boyfriend, but it was really innocent, back in Houston, Texas, where I'm from. And he was like, "You haven't really done anything serious. I just really feel like you need to go to BYU for your own personal whatever." And he's like, "But I am going to recommend that you work with someone, a therapist on BYU campus." And so so I was like, "Okay, that sounds fine." I've never been one to be against therapy, especially because back then I definitely was buying into the idea that I was gay, and that meant that there was kind of something wrong with me, like maybe I hadn't been properly masculinized in childhood, or right. those ideas that are definitely part of the culture that we live in, that just sort of osmotically seep into our consciousness. So I was like, yeah, I definitely could use a therapist, and I knew I had some issues with my dad, feeling a little like I hadn't connected with him properly, and all that stuff, that you definitely think makes you gay, which I obviously don't believe that now, but I was like, okay, great, yeah, I'll totally start working with this therapist. And so I got to BYU, and back then they had therapy in the basement of the Spencer W. Kimball Tower, the Swicket. And that's where they had all the psychology classes, and so like they had, would go down these stairs, and they had this sort of like little atrium, and then that's where the counseling services were, which are now in they're now in the Wilk. They're not in the Swicket anymore for some reason. I guess they needed more office space because they had a lot of screwed up people. I don't know.
So many things.
There's just so many. No, but like, anyone would go there, and I remember I had to fill out a form that was like, what is the nature of your problem? And I'm like, I'm a gay Mormon. Enough said, because, what am I going to fill out? Like, I want to be repaired. I don't know. You know what I mean? So I just wrote, I'm gay and I'm Mormon and I'm at BYU. I think that kind of describes like the nature of my problem. So, so I went in and I met with this guy, and he was quite a bit older, and actually, he was on the verge of retiring, which I didn't know at the time, but he had such a great perspective on everything, because right away he was like, are you trying to change? What are your goals? And I was like, well, I don't know. Should I be? I was like, should I be trying to change? I'm like, I think so. I really want to be married to a woman. I want to be a Mormon. I want to be in the church. I want to, live up to my family's expectations for me. And he was like, I'm just going to be really honest with you. I've never seen anyone change